should be streaming now.
You are. All right, let's continue with this. The judiciary of the United States of America.
A small category of cases that the Supreme Court is required to hear, but broadly the court has a broad discretion over its docket. And if Congress wanted to say, hey, Supreme Court, you're not allowed to hear any cases involving abortion, for example, it arguably could do that, although such a law might be constitutionally challenged. I remember being in law school just kind of indignant at the idea that Congress could violate the separation of powers so flagrantly. My great law professor, Akhil Amar, convinced me that this has been done throughout American history, that before, during the Civil War, Congress deprived the court of the right to hear certain cases involving national security and so forth. So Congress can, if it chooses, exempt certain categories of cases, those that are not in the original jurisdiction of the court, from being heard. There's also the question of whether Congress could impose terms for Supreme Court justices. And there's a proposal floating about to have 18-year terms for the justices and give each president the right to appoint 2 justices and have justices retire after 18-year terms. There's a vigorous debate about whether that could be done by an ordinary statute or whether it would require a constitutional amendment.
Well, if you had to say there...
I got a question, Steve. Which one do you think? Would it have to be a constitutional amendment for justices to... And hello, Miss Hope. Do you think it would be a constitutional amendment for the justices to only serve 18 years? Because it is in the Constitution. It is said a lifetime appointment in the Constitution.
Right. It's or Congress. This is blowing my mind because as much as I'm into this is like I'm learning right now, which is why I said I wanted to be here. So,
I love learning.
Even 18 years seems like a long time, doesn't it? I mean,
almost 2 decades.
Yep. Yeah, this is
almost 2 decades. But the thing about it, these people ain't supposed to be partisan. They're not supposed to be a conservative justice or a liberal justice. They're just supposed to do what the Constitution actually says. So,
exactly.
And that's what people don't understand.
And they don't do what the Constitution says. So,
believe me, I know that. But yeah, I love learning. I love teaching about the actual Constitution because people take. For most of my life, and I'm not going to say this for myself, I won't say it for anyone else, I took the Constitution for granted.
Oh, a lot of people do. I did up until maybe 2 years ago when I started getting into different communities that are involved with the Constitution and our rights. And I'm like, wow, man, at the time I was 45 years old and I'm like, I lived my whole life. I didn't know any of this, So,
Steve, I got a niece and a nephew that's in their late teens, early 20s. A lot of what I'm teaching about with the Constitution, they did not know. They never knew it until me and Zach started doing it about a year ago, what the Constitution actually says.
Right. Exactly.
This is why it's fascinating to learn what people know. But let's continue because we do have another video, one from the National Constitution Center that helps explain a little more about Article 3.
Was one big takeaway about Article 3 that students should remember. What might it be?
That when courts strike down laws as unconstitutional, they're not thwarting the will of the people. They're supposed to be supporting it because the Constitution represents the will of the people. Ordinary laws represent the will of our representatives, and the Constitution is supreme law. So that's why it trumps ordinary legislation.
Americans of good faith and good reason have been disagreeing about the court's role for a long time. I think a challenge for the court is finding the right balance between asserting its independence and exercising judicial review on the one hand, but on the other, being mindful of the fact that it is undemocratic, that judicial review sometimes involves setting aside what the people have decided they want. And that's an awesome power, and it shouldn't be overused. So the court, from time to time in history, has been criticized for perhaps going beyond what the Constitution actually requires and instead enforcing perhaps their own policy preferences or their own political morality.
So we've learned that Article 3 is crucial to the system of checks and balances that limits the power of government in the United States. The Supreme Court exercises judicial review to ensure that the executive branch and legislative branch act within the confines of the Constitution, but the other branches have plenty of checks on the judicial branch as well. One of the most central questions about the Supreme Court is the relevance of the Constitution to the issues we face today. As Richard Garnett points out, some scholars might say it's undemocratic to overrule the will of the people as expressed through their elected representatives based on the Constitution. But, as Jeff Rosen argues, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and therefore striking down a law as unconstitutional isn't thwarting the will of the people, but rather preserving it. To learn more about Article 3, visit the National Constitution Center's Interactive Constitution and Khan Academy's resources on U.S. government and politics.
Well, we are going to learn more from the National Constitution Center because that's where the next video is actually from. But, Steve, which one do you agree with? Would it be would it be against the will of the people to overturn laws that go against the Constitution?
Yeah, to overturn. Yeah, because it's. Yeah, see, I suck at explaining things, but yeah, it's I mean, the Constitution is the Constitution. You can't change it. But then on top of that, when they do make laws,
wait,
all that is
one moment,
one person.
Steve. Yes, you can change the Constitution, but it's a long process to actually do it. There is a long process to changing that Constitution. You know how you do? You know how you change the Constitution? An amendment to the Constitution. We can amend the Constitution at any time, but it takes a long process.
Right.
It actually takes a long process because it has to go through the U.S. Congress. Then it has to go to the states. The states have to ratify it. You have to have 2/3 of the states. So you have to have 34 states actually approve an amendment to the Constitution. It's kind of hard.
It should be hard because I don't know.
I agree with that. It should be hard to actually change what the Constitution says because
they don't even they violate our rights from the Constitution as is. So
yep.
They try to add to it. They're just going to violate those anyway. Just I don't know.
If they don't like the amendment, they will do everything they can to curtail it. But even if something's not in the Constitution and they like it, they are going to say it's in the Constitution. Believe me, and you guys know where I'm going with that. And hello to Steve-O, Diesel Stink, and Cindy. I hope everyone's having a wonderful day. But that's what people don't understand. The process to amend the Constitution takes at least a year, if not longer.
Right.
It takes a while for it actually. It doesn't happen overnight. Most people and I'll just throw this out there. Most people think the Second Amendment should be abolished, but for it to be abolished, it will take. I love the. Now that is me. As you can tell, I don't have a green screen behind me, but as you can tell, I got We the People.
Right?
And Cindy, you're absolutely correct about that, young lady. You're absolutely. They tried to, and that's one of the ways they sidestep the Constitution. Executive order, executive actions.
Yep.
I love the people that's coming over from your streams, because it is a very it does help people learn from what's going on. All right, now
Right.
the next one.
And I'm real quick. I'm real big into like the 1A, 2A community too. So, and that's a lot of Constitution. It's the first Constitution, actually. So, yeah.
Believe me, I support. If we didn't have the Second Amendment, we wouldn't have any other amendment there is. Just saying. That's my opinion. But we do have one from the National Constitution Center. I will. I forgot to do it last week with Ronnie. I've downloaded the videos. I will actually give the links to these videos that we are watching today. So if people want to actually watch them without me or Steve up here, you guys will be able to do that. Baby Love and Mr. Bean. Now that's them are some interesting names.
Today we're going to talk about Article 3 of the Constitution. That covers the Supreme Court and the federal courts. And we're going to talk about the power of judicial review, which is the power of courts to strike down unconstitutional laws. We're going to cover two texts, and they're really exciting and important. The first is Federalist 78, which is Alexander Hamilton's defense of the federal judiciary. And the second is the landmark Supreme Court case of Marbury versus Madison. Let's begin with the text of Article 3 of the Constitution. Section 1 says, "The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish." So the Constitution says you have to have a Supreme Court, but Congress may, if it chooses, establish inferior courts. And then it says the judges both of the Supreme and the inferior courts shall hold their offices during good behavior. So that means they have life tenure. Then Section 2 of Article 3 says, "The judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution and the laws of the United States." And then it goes on to set out a limited category of other cases where the Supreme Court has jurisdiction. That means the court is allowed to or required to hear the cases. And then it says that Congress can make whatever exceptions and regulations that it likes. So the founding generation established this text, which doesn't say a lot, except that there has to be a Supreme Court, there can be inferior federal courts, and there's a certain category of jurisdiction that the Supreme Court has. But it was broadly accepted in the founding generation that this text included the power of judicial review. In other words, the power of judges to strike down unconstitutional laws, even though the text doesn't mention those words. So where did the founding generation get the idea that judges had this power? Federalist 78 gives us the answer. It's so meaningful to read Federalist 78 because it's such a clear explanation in Alexander Hamilton's.
And if you actually want to, if you go over to angryconservative.net, you can actually download every piece of historical document from the Declaration of Independence all the way to the Constitution. You can actually download them for free if you go over to PDF and historical documents, because that is the Federalist Papers are all there. The Anti-Federalist Papers are all on my website. And Steve, you're fine. That's what I was figuring. But
Right.
but read all the Federalist Papers because it gives you an idea of what they were talking about, and even the Anti-Federalists, because the Anti-Federalists didn't want this Constitution, and to some extent, I can see why. Just saying, with everything going on, but it is what we have.
Yep.
But yes, go over and I will put that. Let me pull that up because if I actually have everything.
And real quick, I want to say aloha to Robin Spielman. Good to see you. It's been a little while. Aloha, sister.
And this will go to everybody, and I'm hoping it will even end up on yours. Because this will actually give you everything you guys need. Nope.
I can put it on there. I can just copy it and
go for it. But yes, that you will actually have everything that's ever been with all the documents. And Federalist 78 has hey, I'm happy that I can give this stuff to you guys for free because these are important things to actually know. Thank you, Lisa D. Let's continue. Important. And that's why I put all this stuff on there. I want you guys to have access to it. Let's continue with what Alexander Hamilton, one of the founding fathers of this country, wrote in the Federalist Papers.
Immortal words about why judges have the power to strike down unconstitutional laws. First, Hamilton famously defines the judiciary as the least dangerous of the three branches. Why? The president holds the sword, he can declare war. The legislature holds the purse, it can decide whether or not to fund stuff. The judiciary, on the contrary, has no influence over either the sword or the purse, says Hamilton, no direction either of the strength or of the wealth of society, and can take no active resolution whatever. Hamilton goes on to say, it may truly be said to have neither force nor will, but merely judgment, and must ultimately depend upon the aid of the executive arm, even for the efficacy of its judgments. So Hamilton is saying the courts are so weak they can't even carry out their judgments unless the president is willing to back them up, because they control neither purse nor sword and have neither force nor will. Next comes the heart of Hamilton's argument about why independent judges have the power to strike down unconstitutional laws. First, he says that power is necessary to protect individual rights, and it's a very powerful statement of the importance of judicial independence.
Think about that. Individual rights.
Yep.
One of the reasons me and Steve we want them personal rights. Personal rights are a very tricky thing. Mm-hmm. We might not always agree with what a person does, but it is their personal right.
Yep, exactly. And they get stomped on all the time. And that's the thing, when people don't know that their rights are being violated, they don't know. And it's like, they think they're doing something wrong when in all actuality, it's the exact opposite. You know, it's like, those are your rights. You can do that. Just because someone doesn't agree with it doesn't mean it's wrong.
And all I'm going to say is to everyone over on Steve's, every Wednesday night, every Wednesday, I do the Constitution. And I do have a playlist of everyone that I've done, and I've actually done the Declaration, the Articles of Confederation, streamed, and a stream about the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers, and I've also done every article so far, and I've even did the preamble, and they're all on they're on the website. They're also on my YouTube channel.
Yes. Anyone here that isn't subscribed to AC, definitely check them out. I've known AC for a while, a few years. We go way back.
But I want you guys to know this stuff and share it out. I try to keep these right around an hour. Sometimes I go over, sometimes I'm under it. But I want you to know this stuff because it's very helpful. Let's continue with Mr. Rosen and the article and Article 3 and what Hamilton actually said in the Federalist 78 and all the powers the judiciary actually have. And hey, Joe. Hey, Joker.
And you said they're very helpful, and I was going to say, and like Lisa D said, very important as well.
Yes, they are very important.
Independence. Hamilton says, the complete independence of the courts of justice is peculiarly essential in a limited constitution. By a limited constitution, I understand one which contains certain specified exceptions to the legislative authority. Limitations of this kind can be preserved in practice no other way than through the medium of courts of justice, whose duty it must be to declare all acts contrary to the manifest tenor of the Constitution void. Why? Without this, all the reservations of particular rights or privileges would amount to nothing. So that's a powerful practical argument about the need of enforcement. There's no point of having a Bill of Rights that specifies rights that can't be abridged or having specific limits on congressional power unless someone has the power to enforce them independently to prevent one person like the president from seizing all the power. But Hamilton still hasn't told us the basis for why judges have this power, aside from the fact that it's practical and necessary to have an enforcement mechanism. And that's why the next passage is so crucially important. Why should a judge have the power when faced with a clash between an ordinary law represented by a statute and the fundamental law represented by the Constitution to strike down the ordinary law? Well, Hamilton says there's no position which depends on clearer principles than that every act of delegated authority contrary to the tenor of the commission under which it is exercised is void. No legislative act, therefore, contrary to the Constitution, can be valid. To deny this would be to affirm that the deputy is greater than his principal, that the servant is above his master, that the representatives of the people are superior to the people themselves. This is a remarkable statement. Did you capture all of that? He says that all acts contrary to the spirit of the delegated authority are void. The people themselves have the sovereign power. We, the people, delegate parts of our authority to different branches of government, to the president, to the legislature. We reserve the powers we don't delegate, but and we also delegate to our representatives the power to make laws in our name. But when our representatives act contrary to the spirit of the delegation, which is we're assuming the legislature is not going to violate the Constitution because that represents our supreme will, then Hamilton says judges have to prefer the master to the servant, the principal to the agent. We, the people, are the principals. Our representatives are our agents.
Think about that, people. Most people think we work for the government. No, the government's supposed to work for us.
Absolutely.
That's what the Constitution teaches you. Why do you think they don't want it taught in schools? Think about this. Why would you want to give up? Why would a person like Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer or even Mitch McConnell want to give up the power to us. We're just little ants. Just saying. That's why I'm teaching this stuff. I want people to know that this is they have been kept in check for a very long time because of reasons. I'll put it that way. There's reasons why they don't overstep their bounds very many times, but what we've seen, they're trying to do away with certain things.
Mm-hmm.
But Steve, when was the last time you heard somebody in Congress actually say they work for the people? They work for their constituents.
I can't even remember, honestly. I think I did. Well, okay, wait. I did. I'm trying to think of his name. It was here in Hawaii, and I was at a, I don't know, rally, whatever you want to call it. It was a few years ago. Oh man, I can't remember what he was running for, but he was there, and we shook hands, and I was talking to him and asking him questions, and he was like, "Well, that's my job. I'm here for you, the people." I was like, "Really?" Like, and that kind of caught me. But that was in person here in Hawaii too. But other than that, I don't think I've ever heard any politician say
You
that.
don't hear it. You don't
Right.
hear because the people that's been in there a lot longer than some of us have been alive. Nancy Pelosi's been in. Think about this. Joe
180
Biden.
years.
Joe Biden's been in Congress longer than I've been alive. He's been in government longer than I've been alive. Before he was elected, and don't get on me for that one because of where I'm at right now. When he got elected, he was in office for 47 years.
Is it 47? I was going to say over 50
years.
But close.
I'm 42 years old.
I'm 47. That's since 1976. Yeah.
He's been in government longer than I've been alive.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And Robin, you're completely right about that. You are completely right about that. Our forefathers, they don't say it was because of God, but you can see little hints of it all throughout the freaking Constitution. And I'm happy and I will say this now, is the Constitution perfect? By no means. By no means is the Constitution perfect. But it is the best document other than the Bible to ever be written. My opinion.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
But this is why I love teaching about this stuff. This gets me excited because people are learning about the Constitution. They're learning what the Constitution actually says and what powers are actually.
Like I was saying earlier, up until like 2 years ago, I didn't know anything about the Constitution. And it blows my mind that the first 45 years of my life, I was just like, whatever I was doing, I had no idea. And then I think back of how many times my rights were violated, and I didn't realize that it was happening at the time because I didn't know the Constitution.
And I'm going to say this now, baby love, I'm sorry you are going through that because that's not right. But we know there are greater things at foot than what we can say on this platform. Don't get me wrong. One of my favorite people, I don't always say anything in chat. One of my favorite people is Ronnie. I love watching Ronnie. Ronnie gives me a lot of a lot of hope, even though he is an older man. Steve, think about this. Last week I had Ronnie on. This week I have you on. What the heck? Why am I?
You're on
But
a roll,
this,
man. You're on a roll. And plus,
I
with
love.
Ronnie, I mean, the guy's 197 years old. Think of all that wisdom.
I. Oh, and Steve, I forgot to say this. Shut the heck up.
I was waiting for that. It took you 40 minutes. Wow. I feel better now. Now I'm relaxed because you got that out.
But it's my way of saying hi to him. And if someone's watching in your household, Steve, young lady, you can shut the heck up too. Just saying.
She actually went. Yeah, she came home and then I don't know. She disappeared. She's a ninja.
She's a ninja. But let's
She'll be
continue.
gone. Next second, it's like I'm here. I'm like, whoa, scared me. And then
But
I'm like, hey,
let's-
where'd you go?
Thank you for the double appreciation there, Lisa. But let's continue with Mr. Rosen.
And then Hamilton says again, and even more clearly, why judicial review is necessary to ensure that the Constitution, as the supreme law, is superior to ordinary laws passed by ordinary legislators. Hamilton says, a constitution is, in fact, and must be regarded by the judges as a fundamental law. It therefore belongs to them to ascertain its meaning, as well as the meaning of any particular act proceeding from the legislative body. If there should happen to be an irreconcilable variance between the two, that which has the superior obligation and validity ought, of course, to be preferred. Or in other words, the Constitution ought to be preferred to the statute, the intention of the people to the intention of their agents. Isn't that parallelism interesting? In the previous paragraph, he talked about master, servant, principal, agent. Here he's talking about the intention of the legislatures and the intention of the people. But he winds this up so beautifully by saying, nor does this conclusion by any means suppose a superiority of the judicial to the legislative power. It only supposes that the power of the people is superior to both, and that where the will of the legislature, declared in its statutes, stands in opposition to that of the people, declared in the Constitution, the judges ought to be governed by the latter rather than the former. They ought to regulate their decisions by the fundamental laws rather than those which are not fundamental. So that is it.
Think about what, and I'm going to pull that up. It's this one. All right. Think about that. The judges ought to be governed by, and there will be the will of the legislator declared in its statute stands in opposition to that of the people. Think about that. How many people you think in the United States actually support a certain amendment to the Constitution?
How many people support? Well, the communities I'm in that have
there's millions of people that actually support the Second Amendment. Right. And the Supreme Court in their ruling with Bruin, the latest.
AC, like, real quick, AC. Alan Stone in chat. That's my stepdad. Aloha,
hey,
dad
Alan.
Number 2.
Hello, Mr. Stone. I hope you enjoy this. And that one deserves to be put up on here because I agree with the man.
Yeah,
the Constitution and the Bible. Well, his stepson's a pretty smart man too. I'm just saying. Yeah, I might give him a hard time from time to time.
I'm just a good actor.
You're just a good actor. But you, Ronnie, there are so many people around here that know this stuff, and it's nice to have you guys be able to come up here because I will say this now. This isn't the last time you're going to see Steve on Constitution Wednesdays. I'm going to have him up from time to time because I love what he speaks about. And hey, I will have to get his uh Joker. Go over on my channel and put the link to Steve's channel into the description, into the chat for everyone over on my side, so they can actually go subscribe to Steve, because Steve, he's my karaoke man. I love going over there and listening to everybody.
You know what? I was about to say too, but we got to give AC credit, because the karaoke that I've been doing for 6 months now, the very first one, AC helped me get it going. You remember that? It was like
Yes,
let's talk karaoke, and then 20 minutes into it, we were doing karaoke, and I was like, wow, that went fast. And yeah, so if it wasn't for AC, the karaoke would have never took off.
But
shout out to AC.
But I love having Steve around, because he is a good guy, and it's nice to just be able to support somebody that I have a relationship with. Hey, Hoot. But let's continue, because the Constitution and the judges are actually supposed to do the will of the people, but sometimes the judges can't do the will of the people, because there are certain, and we'll get this when we get to the Bill of Rights, there are certain amendments in the Bill of Rights that take the power out of the federal government's hands and put it into the states. I'm just saying, we'll get into that down the road, but I want you guys to actually know this stuff.
So that is the big idea, that the Constitution represents the considered, deliberate, fundamental will of the people, whereas ordinary laws just represent the temporary and hasty passions of our representatives. Now let's pause on that very important claim. Why does the Constitution represent the will of the people more precisely or accurately than a law passed by Congress today? After all, the Constitution was proposed and ratified 200 and some odd years ago, whereas laws passed by Congress today, you would think, more accurately represent the will of the people in the here and now. Well, what Hamilton doesn't say, but was broadly accepted by the entire founding generation, it was too obvious to point out, was that the Constitution was passed by a special ratification procedure that's much harder to jump through than an ordinary law. To pass an ordinary law, you just need majorities in both houses of Congress and the signature of the president. To pass the Constitution, you have to have proposal by Congress or by a special convention, and ratification by 3/4 of the state legislatures or by special conventions in 3/4 of the states. Because it's so hard to ratify a Constitution or amendments to the Constitution, people have to think hard about it. They have to deliberate. Momentary passions have to be cooled by the light of reason, and that's why we can assume that the Constitution represents the profound, fundamental, considered voice of the people more profoundly than an ordinary law. Now, our whole constitutional system turns on that, on your accepting that premise, that the Constitution does represent the profound, deliberate will of the people more accurately than that of an ordinary law. And once you accept that premise, then it's obvious that judges faced with a conflict between the supreme will represented by the Constitution and the temporary will represented by the ordinary laws has to prefer the principle to the agent. So there it is. It's clear in Federalist 78. It wasn't necessary to put the words judicial review in the Constitution, because in Hamilton's idea, the entire idea of a limited Constitution, as he put it, hinges on the expectation that it will be enforced by independent judges. And that reminds us of the central importance of an independent judiciary in enforcing a limited Constitution. And all this brings us to the landmark case of Marbury versus Madison, which essentially is an applied version of federal.
Do you know what this actual ruling means, Steve?
The Marbury versus Madison?
Yep.
I don't.
I'll let the man speak of it because he is actually a constitutional lawyer and he can explain it a lot better than I can. This is something that we all should know, everyone should know, but most people don't. That's why I asked you if you know what Marbury versus Madison actually means. So because it is a ruling that is very ingrained in our lives today.
78. The facts are dramatic. So, what were they? All this arises from a controversy in the waning days of John Adams' presidency. John Adams has just lost the contested election of 1800. It was a close election, and it was hotly contested, and it was thrown into the House of Representatives after Jefferson and his running mate Aaron Burr finished in a tie. There were rumors about a Federalist plot to deprive Jefferson of the presidency and to install John Marshall, who was then serving as Adams' Secretary of State. Adams lost his bid for re-election. He recognized the judiciary is going to be the last stronghold of the Federalist Party. So he unexpectedly appoints Marshall as Chief Justice of the United States on January 27th, 1801. And around the same time, the lame duck Federalist Senate confirms Marshall really quickly. Marshall takes his oath as Chief Justice in February, and Congress still hasn't chosen a president, and the court is so weak and enfeebled that few newspapers even notice the event. Still, this lame duck president and Congress are working dramatically to consolidate the power of the Federalists in the judiciary before it's too late. So Congress, in the Judiciary Act of 1801, creates a series of new judicial offices to give Adams the chance to make these last-minute appointments. And it also reduces the size of the Supreme Court to deny Jefferson the chance to make appointments of his own, a very dramatic example of partisan court packing early in our history. On February 17th, the House elects Jefferson as president on the 36th ballot, incredibly dramatic cliffhanger. And on March 1st, 3 days before Jefferson's inauguration, Adams stays up late, stays up until midnight, signing new judicial commissions for these new judgeships that Congress has created. The commissions are notarized by John Marshall himself, who's still performing double duty as the lame duck Secretary of State and the Chief Justice. This obviously couldn't happen today, but it was a much smaller government then. And in the confusion of the moment, not all the commissions were delivered to their intended recipients, including one appointing William Marbury to be a Justice of the Peace for the District of Columbia. So then Jefferson's inaugurated on March 4th. The newly elected Republican Congress repeals the Judiciary Act that had created the new judgeships and changes the size of the Supreme Court to allow Jefferson to make the appointments that the Federalists had tried to deny him. Jefferson also orders his new Secretary of State, James Madison, not to deliver the commissions that Adams' appointees never received. So one of the guys who didn't get his commission, William Marbury, sues, and he wants the Supreme Court to order Madison to deliver his commission. In December 1801, Marshall asks Madison to appear in court to defend his refusal to deliver the commissions, and Jefferson reacts with partisan anger. He says the Federalists have retired into the judiciary as a stronghold. From that battery, all the works of republicanism are to be beaten down as a race. So there's a lot of partisan drama around the case, and Madison ignores Marshall's request to appear. And it seems like there's a huge showdown for the court. The legal question is technical and narrow. Did Marbury have a right to his commission? And if so, did the Supreme Court have the power to order Madison to deliver it to him? But the partisan stakes are incredibly high, and Marshall seems to be in a no-win situation.
Think about this, people. It's very much something we've been seeing here lately. Think about this. Former president's getting sued because he doesn't give a commission to somebody, and just say this is an interesting way of doing things. And Axiom, I hope you're having a nice day and all that. I don't know if the Federalists were traitors or not.
Yeah, Axiom is he's really in the Constitution too. I'm actually still trying to set up a live stream with me and him about the Constitution.
That would be an interesting one.
So, Yeah, yeah, he's yeah, like everything I'm listening to right now, I'm just soaking it in because I don't even know none of this. So I'm learning at the
But
same
it
time. But I know,
actually, we are dealt with this every day. This Marbury versus Madison ruling affects us every day because of what actually happens. But let's continue with this. Let him. And Axiom, yeah, like I've said in this stream before, the Constitution isn't the best, isn't the isn't foolproof, but it is the best thing we have. So the good with the bad.
Even setting aside his own role in creating the confusion that made the case possible. If he ruled for the Federalists Party and ordered the White House to deliver Marbury's commission, Jefferson and Madison would simply ignore him, and they would reveal the court to be weak and ineffective. If Marshall ruled that Marbury had no right to the commission, he'd seem to be bowing to political pressure, and his Federalist supporters would be furious. So Marshall extricated himself from this dilemma with an act of judicial jujitsu that 2 centuries later still inspires awe for its subtlety. In February 1803, Marshall hands down an opinion for a unanimous court. He rules that Marbury does indeed have a right to his commission, but the Supreme Court can't order Madison to deliver it because the federal law that authorized the court to issue orders of this kind is itself unconstitutional. So imagine the confusion among the Republicans. They can hardly object to the outcome since Marshall has given them what they wanted in the short term, no commission for Marbury or any of the other midnight judges. But they've lost a battle in the long term because by boldly and unequivocally asserting the power of judicial review, namely the power of federal courts to strike down unconstitutional laws, Marshall has strengthened judicial authority during the decades that he's going to continue to serve on the court in ways that his opponents at the time could hardly have imagined. As with Hamilton in Federalist 78, Marshall roots his decision in the principle of popular sovereignty, in the idea that the Constitution represents the supreme will of the people. For Marshall, it's essential to all written constitutions that, as he puts it, a law repugnant to the Constitution is void. He's echoing Hamilton here. And he also says that courts, as well as other departments, are bound by that instrument, by the Constitution. Famously, Marshall notes it is emphatically the province and the duty of the judicial department to say what the law is, and if 2 laws conflict with each other, the courts have to decide on the operation of each, enforcing the Constitution as the supreme will of the people and the supreme law of the land. So Marshall avoided a confrontation with Jefferson in that case, and he and Jefferson continued their rivalry with wonderfully vivid insults. They were distant relatives and they really suspected each other. Marshall called Jefferson the great Lama of the mountain. It's not clear what that meant, but something about being a llama up at Monticello and looking down at people below him. And Jefferson accused Marshall of twistification, saying that he was so subtle in turning people's arguments against them that if Marshall asked him the time of day, he would reply, "I don't know, sir. I can't tell." Still, and this is important, the 2 rivals and distant cousins did respect each other's institutional authority. Jefferson invited Marshall to swear him into the presidency, and a week after the Marbury case came down, Marshall avoided an even more serious conflict with Jefferson. In the case of Stewart v. Laird, the Marshall Court upheld the Judiciary Act of 1802, which had been passed by the Republican Congress and which repealed the Midnight Judges Act, and delayed the next meeting of the Supreme Court for a year in an effort to prevent the court from ruling on its constitutionality until after it went into effect. It was an example of Marshall's principle: I'm not fond of butting up my head against a wall as in sport. He didn't like to fight battles he couldn't win, and Stewart v. Laird, the more important battle, was one where he deferred to Jefferson, keeping his powder dry and using the power of judicial review wisely and sparingly in the years ahead. With his wise stewardship of the court, Marshall converted it from the weakest and most enfeebled branch of government into a strong and fully co-equal one. He did it not only by the force of his judicial vision, but also by the force of his personality. He persuaded his colleagues to live together in the same boarding house where they would discuss cases over a hogshead of Marshall's favorite drink, which was Madeira. Once, in an unfortunate moment, The justices voted to drink Madeira only when it rained, and Marshall looked out the window and said, "Our jurisdiction is so broad, it must be raining somewhere." But more Madeira and more unanimity. And Marshall's vision of a bipartisan court uniting around unanimous narrow opinions written by the Chief Justice has been embraced by his successors as Chief Justice of the United States, from William Howard Taft to Charles Evans Hughes to our current Chief Justice, John Roberts, who views Marshall as his hero.
Think about that. I want you to go. I'm going to go back. I want you guys to see something. That's why people were getting mad during 2020. It is empathy, the important providence and duty of the judicial department to say what the law is. If two laws conflict with each other, the courts must decide on the operation of each. In other words, if two laws conflict, Bruin and the Second Amendment, that's what people don't understand. That's what actually happened with Bruin. Roe versus Wade and the 10th Amendment. I will throw that out there. Think about that, people. That's why I said we are affected by this ruling every day. Because how the Supreme Court Justice actually wrote it. Steve-O, what you think,
soaking
Steve?
it in. I'm a slow learner, but I love learning, so I'm just soaking it in. I'm like running it through my brain, learning it.
Yeah, that it's magic how.
That's a good question, though. Axiom Head for Joe. What does Article 1, Section 8 say? I don't know. I'm asking because I don't know.
Let me get it. I will actually pull it up.
That's a good question because, like I said, I love to learn. See. And for everyone that just came in, oh shoot, that's not it. Hold on. Or Joe, could you? Oh no, wrong one. Could you put AC's link again in my chat for everyone that just came in, just so they can go sub to AC? I put it in earlier, but I forgot to pin it. So. And Jeremy, because the Jester, good to see you.
And I actually got it pulled up. Article 1, Section 8. The legislative branch, Section 8, powers of Congress. That's all the things that Congress is allowed to do. That is the powers that Congress is allowed to do. And I will put this out.
The coin money reg.
And this is
kind of scary. I don't know if I'm reading that wrong, but that's kind of is.
What?
To coin money, regulate the value, to provide for the punishment.
Yep. To borrow money on the credit of the United States, Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imports, and exercises to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imports, and exercises shall be in uniform throughout the United States. To borrow money to regulate commerce with foreign nations among the several states and with Indian tribes. This is actually their power. And this what most people don't understand.
Yeah, that I didn't. Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with me and Axiom. We're gonna talk about too. But wow, I didn't know that. So that's why they got such big egos.
Yep. Pretty much. But yes, this is but that's they do not want people to actually know this.
They don't.
They don't want you to know this. This is why I'm trying to I don't very often go over an hour because I found out most people don't like anything over an hour on this basis. So I try to keep it right around an hour.
Right. Right. No, yeah, trust me. I go almost 6 hours, and then when you go back and look, the average view time is like 20, 30 minutes. So.
Yep. And when you're not live, it's even less than that. Just saying.
Oh yeah, yeah. That my videos I try to keep under 10 minutes. Yep. Which I still got to work on last week's. I got videos to make.
Now, I love how Axiom actually says it. Article 1, Section 8 is their entitlement over us and our means of enslavement. Yeah, pretty much. But guys, please
Yeah, I
share
can't
this
wait to
stuff
set
out.
that up. AC, when I set that up, would you want to be on there too?
I would be more than willing to come up and have a discussion about this, about the Constitution, because I love it. Yes, I would, because of me sharing the videos of the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. I think both of them have great points. Our governments just went a little too damn far with their powers and what they can do and can't do. Just saying.
Mm-hmm.
We need to get back to where it was when the Constitution was actually ratified in 1791. That's my opinion.
I agree.
But Steve, what do you think about Article 3 of the Constitution? About the judiciary and the ruling that you heard tonight about Marbury versus Madison and how it affects us every day.
Well, like I said, I'm still soaking it in, and yeah, we'll have to do a part 2 so I can have a final thought. Because right now my thoughts are scrambled. Like,
you're gonna get up here again at some point. It might be when we do. All I'm gonna say is I have a couple people in mind when I get to the Bill of Rights. I have a couple people in mind for the very first one, for the second one. And all I'm going to say is you might see him and Ronnie up here with me during the Bill of Rights. I won't say which one. It won't be the second one, but I will bring them back up here. That's all I'm going to say. But please go check out what I have on all of this on my website, on YouTube. But the thing about it, we need to know these because the government does not want people to know it.
and it's very, very important.
Joker, believe me, I understand. But you guys, everyone have a great evening. I am getting off of here. Maybe I'll go back over to my News and Views channel. If you do Angry Conservative 2, at Angry Conservative 2, they got a debate going on in the House of Representatives about the debt ceiling. That's over there. So everyone, thank
Can
you
I-
for coming. Love you
Can
all.
I give a shameless plug real quick?
Yes.
Nina is gonna have a cooking video coming out probably today, but you'll get a notification for it. So look out for Nina's video and hit the thumbs up for her because she's been working really hard on that. So that's my shameless plug.
Nina, I thank you for coming in chat. I didn't say hi to you when you were in chat, but all I'm going to say, if you're still watching, shut the heck up. And I will see everybody. Oh, and tomorrow, Friday, I do happy hour. You'll get to see something Mr. Steve made me way back. It's been a while since that's been made.
I forgot about that. Nice.
But happy hour, come and join. I have funny, weird, and odd stories from around the world. Believe me, I don't even know what. Even though I don't drink, I actually give a drink of the week. I see you there.
1 sec.
I wanted to say, we love you.
Love you and thank you for coming. Yes, Nina's link. Please share that out. Guys, thank you for Steve. Thank you for rushing home as fast as you did. I appreciate this. I enjoy being up here with you. Nina, good to see you, sweetheart. And like I said earlier, shut the heck up.
Shut the heck up.
And Pablo's the good one. He's the good one.
Because he's always
But
wearing
everyone,
a
have
Hawaiian
a
shirt.
great evening. I am getting off of here. It's been a long day. I've been streaming for a while. Later, everybody.
Much love.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. And the